Kyle Odom, 30, was arrested on suspicion of attempted murder by Secret Service agents after they saw him throw something over the iron fence in front of the White House. It was 2 days after he allegedly shot the evangelical pastor Tim Remington in the head and back at point blank in the parking lot of his church in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. At the time he issued a warning, said the Martians in Congress before his arrest. On Tuesday night, the young man was taking photos in front of the White House. A young man with blonde hair and blue eyes approached the black iron gate. Kyle Odom was not there to take pictures, however. He was there to deliver a message to the president. A Secret Service agent saw Odom throw something over the fence and approached him. When the agent investigated his name through a database, it found that this individual had an arrest warrant issued just 2 days before on the other side of the country. The charge: attempted murder. Arriving seemingly out of nowhere, Odom was arrested at the White House. It also provided a strange saga of baffling crimes, ranging from rural Idaho to the capital of the nation, and put them in a potential danger of the lives of 50 members of Congress. What happened outside the White House? When Secret Service agents unknowingly Odom arrested 30-year-old was the only suspect in the shooting of an evangelical pastor in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, on Sunday. According to the authorities, Odom had ambushed Pastor Tim Remington in his church parking lot. Remington, who survived the shooting at point blank, what a church member called a miracle, had appeared a day earlier with Senator Ted Cruz or Tex in an event organized by his presidential campaign. That led to speculation that the shooting was politically motivated. But Odom's manifesto suggests that the shot, if he did, it was something completely different. Who was Kyle Odom? The manifesto opens with the question in the minds of many Americans: who is Kyle Odom? Born and raised in northern Idaho, growing up in a loving family. He joined the Marines after high school. Developed an interest in science. He went to school for a degree in biochemistry. He has won numerous scholarships and awards. He graduated magna cum laude, and then was invited to the prestigious university to work in genetics. How did it all begin? It all started when I was at the University of Idaho, Odom wrote. Spring 2014 was my last semester, and was taking a heavy academic load. I was very stressed because of the intensity of my schedule, so I looked for a way to cope. I discovered meditation, which seemed to help, so he became part of my daily routine. As I learned more about meditation, I became interested in consciousness and our ability to affect it. I kept working on my techniques of meditation, and started achieving extreme states of consciousness. One night in February 2014, Odom was meditating when he said he had an out-of-body experience. He went into a space that was completely dark, and had no knowledge of my physical orientation limits, he wrote. I was very quiet there until a blue light started to approach me. As the blue light approached, I realized that it was another being. When Odom, who had tears in his eyes, according to his manifesto, awoke. At first, the alleged alien encounter seemed a blessing for Odom. The rest of the semester has since very easy for me, he wrote. It felt as if it had exploded in some kind of power. I was not exercising any mental effort, although classes had been extremely difficult before. But this close encounter of Odom would prove to be the beginning of her nightmare. I was dealing with someone extraterrestrial origin. In Coeur d'Alene, Odom received a text message from John Padula, pastor of the church outreach, inviting him to attend the service, he wrote. When Odom was first to the church, it was something very wrong, he wrote. I felt like my life was in danger, and that became so uncomfortable that I had to leave. Odom began receiving text messages from Remington, but saw them as threatening. At first they were innocuous messages of the Bible, but then began to threaten me, Odom wrote. He sent messages that speak of power and other things. He did all this through Bible verses so it would not look suspicious. When Remington Odom allegedly sent text reading angels, the Navy veteran saw helicopters flying around your house. At this point, I knew I was in trouble. Odom began experiencing strange sensations and suggestive songs heard in his head, and Remington soon the songs gave way to a voice saying they would be slaughtered like Jesus and be beheaded, he said. When a man knocked on his door with a religious pamphlet, Odom felt completely delusional, and thought for sure he was going to die. A one-way ticket was purchased to see his family in Albuquerque, and said he thought the man next to him on the flight was reading his mind. In the baggage, Odom thought he was surrounded by extraterrestrials, which could be detected by their constant inhalation. The aspiration is something they do all the time, he wrote. I think it has to do with domination. Odom thought he saw aliens everywhere. They were run by humans, but actually looked like giant green frogs with proboscis at the top of his head, he wrote. As time passed, he began to persuade me to go out alone, he wrote. I was scared to death. I thought they would kill me, so I refused. I told them I was going to do whatever they want if left alone to my family. They replied saying, "Go to church." I knew that meant the altar, so I agreed to go when I arrived. On the altar, Odom smelled something like a reptile and vinegar, he wrote. I realized that I was dealing with an alien, so I got really scared. Sometimes the manifesto Odom seems to recognize that it is delusional. I started hearing voices more often and began to hallucinate things that I knew were not real, he wrote. However, because the voices and visions that were not his own mind, and that came from the aliens who spoke telepathically mind. Part of his alien obsession seems to have been sexual. They also began to play with me sexually. He wrote of his tormentors Mars, which he called hypersexual. Both males and females would perform their sexual fantasies in my mind. Once in a bakery grocery, Odom thought he was surrounded by a group of old men who were actually aliens. Because of his visions, that torment caused Odom attempted suicide twice, said in his manifesto. It filled a charcoal grill with coals, put it in my car and rolled up the windows, he wrote. I leaned back in my seat, calmly settled there, and then I fell asleep. But foreigners are not allowed to die, Odom wrote. I awoke in extreme panic, which made me out of the car, he wrote. According to its manifesto, Odom went into the local hospital Veterans Affairs. After leaving the hospital, Odom returned to the altar church, where finally face to face he met the pastor Remington. My life was ruined. It is unclear whether actually met with Odom Remington, who emerged from a coma on Monday and has not spoken publicly about the shooting. In the manifesto of Odom, however, the Navy veteran describes sit with the pastor sometime around August last year. We were half a conversation when suddenly revealed to me, Odom wrote. I have no idea how he did it, but it seemed as if his human face became his true face. His eyes were huge and bulging eyelids were of a darker green, and the irises were yellow-brown with strange cracks. Odom thought he would become a sex slave of the church wrote, but when that did not happen, and he was not seen again until the shooting occurred Sunday. Drawing of an extraterrestrial included in the manifest Odom. For a while, it seemed his nightmare might be coming to an end. Returned to school, studying pharmacology at North Idaho College, he said. I started to recover, he wrote. Unfortunately, I went to school, he said of the extraterrestrials. There were several of them in every class I took. They made it impossible for me to study, and continually harassed them, especially while I had the evidence. Odom wrote that he was attacked because of their knowledge of genetics, and because the aliens had difficulty controlling his mind. I was too smart for my own good, so they decided to get me out of society, he wrote. They were worried that could change the way other people think, which could lead to problems. The problems in the form of a scientific revolution. After trying to kill herself twice, Odom felt her only option was to go after the aliens, he wrote. My life was ruined, he said. Ruined by an intelligent species of amphibious humanoid on Mars. The manifesto does not discuss why, exactly, Odom went after the pastor Remington. Remington Single and Padula said were supposedly puppets of the aliens. But the manifesto helps explain why Odom traveled to Washington after the shooting, and tried to communicate with the president. On Tuesday night, the police chief Coeur d'Alene Lee White said Odom drove from his hometown to Boise, Idaho, where he boarded a flight to the Capitol. White said it was unclear how was allowed to travel to Odom, but it could have raised before it was identified as a suspect. The manifesto suggests that Odom traveled to Washington to deliver a message to Obama. Part of his letter is addressed to the president. I want to thank you for your sacrifice to this country, which begins, before suggesting that the president is controlled by aliens. They brag to me about what they do for you, Odom wrote. I hope you stop letting humiliated. It's about time someone took a position to stop this nonsense. Can you think of a better legacy than that? The manifesto also includes a list of 50 members of Congress who are Martians noteworthy. Belonging to both parties, as well as about 36 members of the Israeli leadership, including every prime minister since 1948. This is by no means an exhaustive list, Odom wrote. The Martians are ubiquitous. They exist in all levels of society in every nation. Some have blue-collar jobs, while others in positions of power. They control our government, our military, and corporations too. They keep track of all human beings wild on the planet, and we have all we humans like animals in a zoo. Our freedom is a carefully crafted illusion. It is unclear what Odom was trying to deliver to Obama when he was arrested Tuesday night, but could have been flash units with their manifesto in them, similar to those sent to their parents in the media Idaho. White, the police chief of Coeur d'Alene, said the manifesto was definitely played an important role in raising our awareness and concern Odom as a fugitive. He said authorities were surprised about where Odom was gone until it emerged in social networks Tuesday. Things are not what they appear to be. The world is ruled by an ancient civilization on Mars. Pastor Tim was one of them, and he was the reason it was ruined my life, Odom wrote in a Facebook message, changing their profile picture to a picture of an alien. I would like to share my story with as many people as possible. I do not have time right now that persecute me. There is no way any human being could have survived that event. Anyway, I sent my story to all major news agencies. I have no time, I have to go. He was arrested a few hours later.